The Boks defended their Dubai Sevens title with dominant performances at the weekend and a 24-12 victory over New Zealand in the final, while at the same time in Cardiff, the Springboks went down to Wales in another disappointing defeat for Alistair Coetzee. To discuss this a bit further, we are joined in studio by S24 editor Garen Lamley and chief writer Rob Howing. Gents, good morning, and it's good to have you back in studio, likely to be our last studio chat for the year. A good sporting weekend once again, rugby aside. Tiger Woods making somewhat of a comeback, and of course we've got the Ashes second test currently underway. But yes, a lot of talk around the Springboks, of course, the end to their season, possible end to Alistair Coetzee's tenure, and the rumour mill about his replacement is alive and well. Rob, let's start with you. Let's just quickly have a look at the match itself. The Boks down 2 tries sort of early up, but then fighting back quite bravely, but then coming undone by a lot of the same frailties, the high ball, selections, etc.
Yeah, it was really a case of chickens coming home to roost. They sort of fell apart quite critically in the sort of key positions that I've had such long time fears about, namely the back three, I suppose the back line generally. I think Garen will agree with me that it's probably the weakest Springbok back line that we've fielded in many a decade, just in terms of the, sadly, the sheer quality of players available. I mean, you don't want to disguise too readily, but you know, if you've got a fairly moderate bunch anyway, the weaker ones will be exposed even more than, you know, if you had, say, a Jacques Fourie or a Jean de Villiers to kind of provide some sort of sanity, some sort of strategic sanity to things, and that's just absent. I mean, it really is kind of headless chicken stuff with the back line. You know, the Springbok pack of forwards is still very decent. That's the one thing that gives me hope going forward, is that and I'm about to write that I think there is a possibility that South Africa can actually turn around quite quickly, just with the right approach, the right person in charge of them, coaching strategic-wise. You know, it's not a completely lost cause, but it's still desperately embarrassing that we lost to a Welsh team that it really was their second team. I think saying it was their third team might be a little bit cruel, because the Springboks also are missing a few key players at the end of the season. So let's say it was almost like South Africa playing Wales A, and we lost, which is not ideal. And you have to think that it's the you know, the nail in the coffin for Alistair Coetzee. I cannot imagine that the public or even the administrators now would be prepared to tolerate him staying on, despite his kind of sounding surprisingly upbeat and bullish afterwards, defiant almost, but just smacked too much of a sort of a lager mentality, just a defiance that is not based on any kind of statistical excellence. Bottom line, you know, 44% is Alistair's record, nowhere near good enough for what you expect of the Springboks, regardless of what he says about progress and so on. So he's done what he did with the Stormers, really. He built a decent pack of forwards, but a team that collectively couldn't win anything. And a backline that is a huge mess. That's the bottom line. South Africa have got to, you know, do some major rethinking around how they want to play their entire brand of rugby. You know, the mix of forwards and backs, but also the backline specifically. As you mentioned, you know, so ropey under the high ball. That was desperately costly. It's been a problem for weeks, so it's not as though you can say, oh, we didn't see this coming. You know, Alistair has to take the rap for the fact that his selections were just not the right guys. We're physically not up to it. They just don't seem to have the technical ability to deal with high balls properly. And it made for a little bit of a sort of laughingstock situation, unfortunately. So, you know, we're in a lopsided situation where we are presenting a pack going forward for the next couple of years that I think will be right up there with any pack in the world. But a backline that is so far behind the 8 ball that there's an awful lot of catching up to sort of marry the two dynamics. It's a pretty gory situation.
Garen, you got any comments on the match itself? Also defensive lapses, and, you know, talking about personnel. You know, there was a lot of criticism about playing Gallant at wing instead of fullback, and he wasn't quite sure how to position himself. What did you make of
look, I mean, they're well summed up by Rob. I mean, there are a lot of points that obviously can be made. I mean, as you could see in midweek, stated his belief in Andres Coetzee at fullback. I'm not too sure what he sees in him that almost everybody else doesn't see. He stuck with him through thick and thin this entire year. Geland's playing out of position. We've seen Deon Lates play at fullback in the Currie Cup final. I think John Dobson said he needs to get more involved in the match, and he can obviously do that more from fullback than from wing. But he's stuck out on the wing. He's the one player that's got a bit of X factor, I think, in that backline. He led his attack from deep led to the one try that we scored on Saturday, probably the best moment for South Africa in that entire match. I don't quite see what Adesanya Coetzee sees in his own players. From an outsider, it doesn't seem obvious. As Rob said, now I've always said that the Springbok pack will see us through certain matches, but as soon as we come up against a team that's equally dominant amongst the forwards, like in England and New Zealand, in Ireland in particular, we'll always have the worst backline. It's just that we get away with matches that we have a dominant pack of forwards at the ruck, at the maul, at scrum time. But times that we meet our match, if you like, up front, we're always going to lose because we simply just don't have the backline players to compete. They've got more skill, more imagination. They try things. These cross kicks. We send cross kicks into the stands. They send their pinpoint accuracy out to the wing. So we're always lacking in the finesse, the X factor, that sort of the willingness to experiment out amongst the back. So that's always been sad for me. When we look at the 27 as a whole that's now finished, we beat France, the worst French side I think I've ever seen, 4 times. I mean, we don't often play any team 4 times in a year, but we managed to find the worst French team and played them 4 times and won all 4. And then you beat Argentina twice and Italy once. I mean, those teams are ranked 8th, 9th and 14th, I think it is, in the latest standing. So we've beaten nobody in the top 7, obviously apart from ourselves, which doesn't say much at all. And Adesanya Coetzee was adamant that we had massively improved on 2016. And 2016 was the worst year in I think 112 years of Springbok rugby.